we have a closing keynote forecasting uncertainty. Excel modeling to overcome data limitations. And please help me welcome Emma Franks, AVP of Marketing for Tab Bank. Welcome. Here's your feedback.
Yes. Okay. We got a little collection of water up here. This is great. Okay. We will see if yeah. All right. We're banging on all cylinders. Okay. I know that I am standing between you and cocktails, so we'll go through this as quick as we can, but I want to make sure that everyone gets as much information as possible to help you all out. This is forecasting uncertainty. Talking about Excel, we've had a lot of talk about AI today and kind of the tech forward. I'm like an old school nerd that really likes Excel and spreadsheets and all that stuff, so I'm going to share some things that are more internal process type information. We've heard a lot about external facing, which, oh my gosh, can we get another hand for all the presenters today? There's been so much good information. These are the promises that I made to you in the session description if you read it. It's a lot to get through in 25 minutes. Whoever is running the timer up here, can we reset this so I can make sure I have a sense of how long I'm taking? Thank you. Okay. I have my LinkedIn up here. I'm realizing now it's very small. It's just /in/Emma Franks, so you can search me. If you have questions that I don't cover, we don't have time for, please add me. Please just add me if you want to be connected, or come talk to me at the reception. There will be a lot of nerdiness, but hopefully it will also be actionable. To start off, we're going to do a thought experiment. Imagine with me that you are standing in front of whoever your particular stakeholder is. If it's a big client, if you're agency side, if it's your direct supervisor or your CMO or your CEO, whoever that is, you have this presentation, marketing strategy for the next quarter, say, and you've been practicing this for weeks. You're like, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be great. We're going to have these awesome case study results like we heard today. And you get interrupted 3 minutes in saying, how do you know this is going to work? Or what impact is this going to have on the business? I will admit, I used to hate those questions because I would stand there and I'd be like, well, we have some numbers for you that I kind of pulled out of thin air because, I don't know, this is what we saw in the past. Maybe this is what we'll see in the future. And it was really uncomfortable. I hope none of you have ever been in those shoes. If you have, my condolences to you. Hopefully you'll never have to be there again. Uncertainty is nothing new. We've all seen this quote or some variation of it. I was trying to find the original source, and it went back like 150 years. A lot of uncertainty about where this started. Pun, that was unintended. The thing about being in marketing, right, is that a lot of the impact that we have can't be measured. And the things that we can measure change all the time. So we're in this really fun paradox of being in an industry that's obsessed with data and measurement and metrics, and also being in this industry that is full of this black box. We get what they give us, and we hope that it's correct. Uncertainty exists. I promise this whole presentation is not just to tell you that uncertainty exists. But there's also unforeseen shocks to the metrics that we do get into our reports. We've all lived through a global pandemic. Hopefully, we don't have to live through that again. But even if we do, or even if we don't, I guess, we're seeing economic shifts, we're seeing political shifts, we're seeing shifts in tastes and preferences as generations get older and their lifestyles change. So basically, this all sums up to we have to expect the unexpected. I swear that's a movie quote. I tried to find what movie it's in. If you know, come up and tell me so that I can have that off of my mind. The objective of this technique that I'm going to show you for incorporating uncertainty variables into our Excel models is to make it easier for stakeholders to say yes. So if you are like a marketing specialist or analyst or somebody that's in the weeds, raise your hand. Yeah, we got some of those. If you are more mid-level manager, a VP, or somebody that has a team under you doing statistical analysis in the weeds stuff, raise your hand. Okay. Do we have any executives, presidents, top tier? Oh, that's okay. Oh, yay! Yay, thank you for coming. I know that we have some independent contractors here because I've met some of you. So you might be wearing all of these hats, right? This can apply to everybody. It can apply in existing models that you have. You don't have to be building a brand new model to incorporate this. And I'll show you where you can plug this into your existing models. So these are some use cases. Little disclaimer, because we're in finance, right? We got to have disclaimers. Forecasts are not predictions. And actually, I like this distinction because we're not just pulling numbers out of the blue. Our forecasts are grounded in data. And so we can say, this is exactly where we got this prediction, this forecast from. I can show you the data that sourced it, I can show you the assumptions that have been made, and I can show you where I've controlled for uncertainty. That's the objective by the end of this. There we go. Okay. So we got a little bit of foundational stuff to go through. I'm not going to teach a stats class, but if you took stats once upon a time, you may be familiar with these terms: independent variables, dependent variables. These are basically what's going into your model versus what is coming out of the model. You can have many different independent variables that feed into one dependent variable that depends on the things that are being fed in. Now, the reason that I bring this up is because uncertainty variables can take the place of independent variables, but not dependent variables. We're not going to throw uncertainty and say this is our output, right? We want something useful to come out of our models. Now, a real-life scenario to hopefully solidify some of this. I work for Tab Bank, and we have just soft launched a new checking product. And so one of the fun things with launching a new product is having no historical data. Now, our leadership could come to me and say, how many new accounts is marketing going to generate this year? 12? I don't know. Now, I don't have to say that, thankfully, because we can generate a model based on some of our existing data with similar products, and that's what I'm going to walk you through. So as I'm choosing these variables, I know that my outcome is going to be the number of new accounts or the number of conversions in digital marketing speak. And the independent variables that feed into this are going to be my budget, my cost per click, and my conversion rate. And I'll talk a little bit about why I explained those. But it really comes down to knowing what you're trying to get out of the model. So you've got your outcome that you're looking for. I color-coded this. I hope this is helpful for some people. I'm very visual, and I'm like, colors, this will help me keep track of what she's talking about. So your outcome, and then what are the factors that play a role in that outcome? What are the things that might affect it? So if I'm thinking about conversions, how much I spend to promote it, hopefully, is going to have an impact, right? That's something that's entirely in my control. Well, I say entirely. That's a generous... I can control what goes into the ad platform and what they are allowed to spend. Cost per click, I can control what I'm bidding. There is a little bit of uncertainty there, right? Because my bid is not going to exactly equate to my cost per click. And my conversion rate. I have a little bit of control there because I can influence the site experience, the factors that the customer is having to interact with. Is it a really terrible process? Is it a super smooth process? Those are not all things I personally control, but the bank as a whole and teams, we do have influence over that. So the last part here is the relationship between the inputs and outputs. Some of you might be familiar with this. These are kind of standard relationships between different digital marketing KPIs. CPC, CPM, which is cost per 1,000 impressions, and audience size, which we typically see a lot more on social, although Google has been offering those in roundabout ways for several years, and I think maybe even directly now in some of the smart campaigns. But those are things that you can sometimes find benchmarks for online. I have not seen as many benchmark reports published in recent years as I did 5 or 10 years ago. But a lot of the ad platforms now will actually output, or like when you put in your campaign and you're building it, they'll say, hey, here's your estimated audience that you're going to be reaching. Here's the expected cost per click. Is my sound going out? Am I okay? All right. The last refresher that we have is with probability. I am going to apologize in advance to any statisticians in the audience because this is going to be a super duper oversimplified version of probabilities. But you can think of that far right, the bell curve, what we're used to seeing. This is kind of the ideal state where we have lots of historical data, we have a continuum of possible values, things that, kind of every scenario is covered. On the less precise side, we have discrete probabilities, and these are individual use cases. So it can still account for many different values on that continuum. I shaped these purposefully, both kind of like bell curves, but the distinction there is that the discrete are actually different scenarios. So you can also use this for qualitative circumstances. So this can be used in a binary situation of, did we run ads on this channel or did we not? Did we launch our new product? Did we not? Do we have different combinations of ad platforms running different channels? You can use all of those and build scenarios that then feed into your probability model. So I really love this because it allows me to account for circumstances where I don't have historical data, either because I'm launching a new product or because we have something wonky with our tracking and data just fell out for a little while. There's a lot of different reasons why we might not have good historical data on which to base our models. Okay, that's all of the introductory stuff. We're going to get into the fun part. This is my little analogy. We're going to have a fishing lesson. You can learn how to fish. If you have your computer and you want to try to speed code along with me, you're welcome to, but I'm going to go through this really quick. The first, if you're building a model, you don't have an existing model, you're going to list your independent variables. So again, I chose budget, average cost per click, and average conversion rate because these will help me to define how many conversions I'm potentially going to get. I left a little space there, which I like to do when I'm building models so that I have somewhere to plug in uncertainty. So you'll see that in a second. Then you're going to add test or sample data. These are completely arbitrary values that are just there to prove that your relationship, the formula that you're using, is working. So I have plugged in this formula, budget over average CPC, tells me how many clicks I can buy with my allocated budget, and then multiplying by the conversion rate tells me how many conversions I can get from that number of clicks. The next thing you want to do is test your model. So you're going to change one by one the values in each of those yellow cells, my independent variables, and hopefully your conversions or your output cell is also changing. If you are testing a model and you change one of your independent variables, but the outcome or the dependent variable doesn't change, that is a big red flag. Either you have put your formula in incorrectly, and you need to figure out what's going on there, or else you have selected an independent variable that isn't actually relevant to your model. Now, this is pretty easy to see on this small scale where we only have 3 independent variable cells, 1 output, but if you're building a complex model with a lot of different data pieces feeding into it, sometimes it can be tricky to keep track of like, oh, is this cell actually being used anywhere? So this is a test that you can run. All right, now we get to the fun part of defining our probabilities. Going back to my scenario with our tab spend product, we have previously, so tab spend has high yield APY and a cashback checking component. We have had historically, over the last 5 or 7 years, we have offered different variations of checking products that have either high yield or cash back. We've never done with both. So I can look at, data that's a few years old, and I can see what was I paying for clicks when I was promoting this once upon a time. And we have some more recent data from our high yield savings account that, maybe is a better indicator of what the market is like today. But I don't have a lot of confidence in any of those past data points to forecast what the future is going to be like. So I might look at that historical data and I might come up with a blended CPC of $3. Probably not realistic in today's market, but we'll say that's what the baseline is. Now, because I know that we live in a world of inflation, I don't think CPCs are ever going to be below that, but there's a very good chance that they might be above that. So I have created alternate scenarios with an increasing CPC. You can see those 4 laid out, my probability of occurrence, and the variable change shows how much CPC is increasing. The white cells are actually formulas. The first white column is just basically taking a sum of the previous probabilities. So if we were on a bell curve, it would be like where on that bell curve do I get to this particular scenario? And then the probability value is just that baseline with the inflation added to it. So that's an example of using average cost per click with discrete probabilities. On the conversion rate side, our application process for tab spend is actually the same as it is for tab save for our other products. So I have more confidence that the website data that I have is going to probably mirror a little bit better with this new product. So I might take our historical website analytics, download a report segmented by day or week, however much data I can generate, and then take the average of those conversion rate values and the standard deviation, get to use a normal probability. Now, this is the screen you'll want to take a picture of or write down these formulas. The superhero in this slide, really in this whole presentation, is the RAND function. This is a function that generates a random number between 0 and 1. And then what the formulas are doing is taking that number between 0 and 1 and looking up within the probability table to see, okay, where does that fit, either in the discrete probabilities, which threshold does that fall into, and what's the corresponding probability, or it's doing an inverse lookup, more like a z-table, and drawing back based on the mean and the standard deviation, what's the value that corresponds to that random number. You don't have to memorize that if you've got this formula. I do also have templates at the end, so don't stress about that. But those allow us to pull in our uncertainty variable into the model. Every time you press enter, you should see a different value populating that green cell, and we can replace in our outcome cell previously the static variable for average CPC, now with our uncertainty variable. Okay, real quick, you can go way down deep in the hole with this. If you want, you can add multiple independent variables, and I've shown 2 different, styles, I guess, of what this might look like. Either concurrently, where you have multiple independent variables feeding into the same dependent variable, so we have uncertainty in CPC and uncertainty in conversion rate feeding into our conversions, or you can have sequential, where you have kind of different layers of models or different pieces of the model. So you might have uncertainty feeding in your conversions, and then also uncertainty feeding in combination with that conversion output to determine your revenue. Again, happy to talk more in depth on more specifics later, but these get us individual iterations, which then becomes the basis for generating statistics. So having the model is great, but we need it to tell us something. My favorite way to conduct sensitivity analyses is with data tables. This basically lets Excel do all the work for you. It will, if you put that output cell formula, and then you have 1,000 lines, it can generate 1,000 different outputs based on those different scenarios with the random variable. Love letting Excel do the work. Now this lets us generate statistics, best, worst case scenario, with our minimum and maximum values, the median expected value, mean and standard deviation. There's a couple people taking pictures, so I won't move on. Super quick. But this feeds us into our actual forecasts, right? This is what we wanted to get out of our model. We made it. Okay, you don't have to clap for me. That was, thank you. So there's a couple different ways you can present this. Either you can do a range, right? So we can say this is the minimum that it projected, this is the maximum, or we can say this is the expected value, and here's kind of, the deviation that we might anticipate. I like to include this footnote saying these are the assumptions that it's based on, these are the variables that we controlled for uncertainty. Ultimately, as I said, the objective is to strengthen our confidence as we are going into these presentations. So we can go to our executives and shift the conversation from, hey, here's all the problems that we've been having, this is what we want to do with our budget next quarter, to, hey, here's how we want to drive revenue in the next 3 months. This is how much we think we're going to get. These are the steps that we have outlined to get us there. If you want extra practice, there's a QR code. This is just my personal website. It's completely free, ungated. I'm not going to collect any of your information. There are 2 tools that I put together. One covers basically what we just talked about, which is forecasting with uncertainty variables. The second one is forecasting specifically for new channels or organic growth. The new channels, basically just a bunch of marketing math to say, hey, what are our benchmarks? What do we think we can get out of the budget that we're putting in? Organic growth does kind of the same thing. How much are we missing out on our current impression share opportunities? If we make increased investment, what would we get out of it? But thank you all so much for having me, and we do have a couple minutes left for questions, I think. Or we can just go get cocktails.
Oh.
Okay. Do we have a mic? Do you want? Okay. Very good question. I love this. So he asked about accuracy and reliability. And I'm going to give you the marketer's favorite answer. It depends, right? So I may have forgotten to say this in one of the earliest slides with the crystal ball, the picture. My notes, I was supposed to say that the quality of what you get out of your model is going to be dependent on what you're putting into it, right? So, I mean, it's going to be better than nothing, but a model that you can put in probabilities that you have a very high confidence in is going to be much better than a case where I only have industry benchmark data, right? And this is what I'm using as a baseline. Now, a couple different ways that you can help with that. One of my team members asked me about this when I was doing a dry run at home at the bank. And one of the ways that you can use industry benchmarks with your own data, right, is to say, in the past when I ran ads, I noticed that my actual CPCs were 13% higher than what the industry benchmark was at that time. So now if I look at a current day industry benchmark, I know to inflate that CPC. That's going to give me a higher level of confidence, and will kind of synthesize those 2 data points. So again, as much as you can use your own historical data, definitely do. If you need to get kind of creative about ways to make your own data useful to you, that will make it even better. But again, having uncertainty variables based on industry benchmarks is going to still make your model much, much stronger than having a model based on industry benchmarks without uncertainty. So likely you'll just get a much wider range of possible outcomes because there's less certainty in the data going into it. Very good question. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much.